Imagine yourself stepping out onto a busy street in Victorian England, a street alive with the ring of horse hooves, the chatter of shoppers, the sight of shop windows glowing under gaslight, and all around you the promise of goods, necessities, luxuries, and novelties. This is shopping in the age of Queen Victoria. It's more than just buying things. It's a window into family life, class, work, gender, technology, and the dawn of modern consumer culture. We'll take you on a journey through the markets and bazaars, the humble village shop, and the grand department store. We'll meet the shopkeepers, the assistants, the customers. We'll hear about credit, about delivery, and the first overhead cash rails. We'll explore how women's roles in shopping changed, how the mighty cooperative movement emerged, how food and fashion both shaped and mirrored society. And we'll ask, what did shopping mean in Victorian times, and how did it change the world? In the poorest streets, you'll find small shops, a chandler selling bacon and cheese, a rag and bottle store, a pawnbroker, maybe a cook shop. In contrast, in more affluent areas, you'll see drapers, milliners, dressmakers, grocers with polished counters, and delivery carts. That variety tells us a lot about social class. For working-class families, the shop is not a place for recreation but necessity, whereas for middle-class families, shopping begins to take on a social or even pleasurable dimension. Most shops are owned by men, and this was because during the Victorian era it was the belief that women lacked the brains or stamina for business. Yet some women do run businesses. There were milliners, seamstresses, street sellers, even widows taking over a shop when their husbands have passed. The fact that it happened at all speaks to the changing tides of opportunity and the growing change happening within Victorian society and culture. In the early days of the Victorian era, the smaller shops would serve you from the street through an open window, and you'll have to remain outside until the goods come out to you. But the counter-service model prevails in larger shops. The idea is that you are attended to and treated as an individual customer whose custom matters. The concept was that by delivering a great service, the shop would win your business, and you would come back again to buy even more goods. In fact, the word shop in the Victorian sense often implied more than a small corner store. It could be a large building with multiple departments, vaulting ambitions, and early forms of what even then were called department stores. But how you pay shapes the whole shopping experience. Most working-class customers didn't pay with bank checks or credit cards. Of course, these didn't exist in the modern sense. Instead, they paid in cash, using mostly coins, using pounds, shillings, and pence. Prices back then look odd to our eyes. For example, something like 2 and 6 would mean 2 shillings and 6pence. And because few people have bank accounts, many shops would extend credit to regular customers. They keep what was known as a trust book, recording what you owe, and you're expected to clear that account at the end of the week before being allowed to buy further on tick, or more commonly known as on the slate. But that credit system is a double-edged sword. If you miss payments due to not being paid because of illness or unemployment, then your shopkeeper may refuse further goods, and you will have to turn to the pawnbroker or even worse, to the workhouse. For the working class, this credit system is both lifeline and risk. But for the middle and upper class in Victorian times, you might have an account with a shop settled monthly or quarterly. This allowed your servants go out to buy without taking cash, and thus avoiding risk of theft or loss. Until late in the 19th century, many smaller shops don't have mechanical cash registers, so they used wooden trays or bowls for coins, and sometimes drawers, and maybe a simple ledger. But in larger shops, a novelty appears. the overhead cash rail or cash ball system. This is where money and bills are placed in hollow capsules and then transported on an overhead wire to a central cash office by means of a pulley operated by the counter assistant, and the change comes back the same way. So shopping isn't just what you buy, it's about how you pay, how the business is organized, how the shopkeeper and the customer relate with each other, and how the hidden infrastructure beneath every purchase shapes the growth of shopping culture. But shopping for food and other necessities is another matter, and there are many reasons why. In the Victorian era, refrigeration at home is virtually non-existent for most households. Icehouses do, however, exist on grand estates, and some wealthy townhouses have lead-lined iceboxes in cellars, but not the everyday family. This means perishable goods must be bought regularly, often daily, such as bread from the baker, meat from the butcher, milk, butter, and eggs from the dairy or grocer. This meant that this form of shopping was often fragmented, and the housekeeper, often the woman of the household, would have to organize many errands. Shop interiors also reflected the growing attention to hygiene as the century advances. This was because wooden counters and floors were often unhygienic and hard to clean, so the use of marble slabs and tiled walls became more common. In Victorian food shops, people also bought smaller quantities of foodstuffs and simply asked for the weight they require. This is measured out and wrapped in paper. As for liquids, such as milk, beer, vinegar, even paraffin, these are often measured into the customer's own jugs, bottles or cans, especially in working-class districts. But if you are looking for a bargain or have a limited budget, you'll be off to the market, unless you live in a city. A large city market hall may house dozens or hundreds of stalls, such as butchers, fishmongers, fruit and vegetable stalls, and many more. These city markets were large and purpose-built with covered structures that served as a central hub for commerce and social activity in rapidly growing industrial towns. They were designed to replace the unsanitary open-air street markets and to centralize trade and project an image of civic pride and order. One 1858 guide describes a Birmingham market hall with 600 stalls, each fitted with water taps and independent drains to prevent unpleasant and harmful odors, and to wash away any discharge the stall may create. Victorian engineers utilized new industrial materials like wrought iron and glass to create large, open and light-filled interiors. This design, sometimes compared to the single-span roofs of major railway stations like St. Pancras, allowed natural light to filter in and provided essential ventilation. Outside the bigger towns are the village shops, and these are wonders in their own right. One writer describes a village shop in 1848 as containing green apples, currant cakes, toys, balls of cotton, pins, needles, shoe binding, mops and brooms, salt and sugar, tobacco and tea, and even bricks and brushes. It's the one-stop shop of rural life where goods and gossip mingled in one room. And then there is the itinerant traders and hawkers who will also sell you goods. These people roam rural areas and small towns with baskets and bundles such as honey measured into jars, broom heads, tinware, even rabbit skins. But whatever you buy and where you buy it from may offer you the option of home delivery. This was mostly for the middle and upper classes and involved the use of a horse and cart, but when bicycles became common in the 1880s to the 1890s, shops employed boys to deliver goods. For the middle classes, this service adds convenience, an early precursor of exactly the kind of shopping ease we take for granted today. But what about fabrics, clothes, millinery, dressmaking and fashion? In the Victorian era, both men and women shopped for new clothes, whether it's seasonal or for special occasions such as balls, weddings and funerals. A diary from 1864 of a young woman records shopping trips to buy a hat, boots, epaulettes, which is a type of ornamental shoulder piece, spring raiment, and lengths of fabric rather than ready-made garments. Specialist shops also include drapers, hat makers known as milliners, and dressmakers who advertise silks, shawls, mantles, and ready-made linen for ladies and gentlemen. They also sold kids' dresses, children's wear, and even mourning attire, which in Victorian culture was huge. It was a traditional dress code worn by the bereaved to publicly signal their grief and social status after a death, and this practice reached its peak during the Victorian era from 1837 to 1901. As the mid to late Victorian era evolves, we see the emergence of the department store most prevalent in larger towns and cities. A store might begin as a drapery, but expand into many departments, such as silks, linens, umbrellas, artificial flowers, food, ironmongery, housekeeping, and even hairdressing. For instance, one early business began with ribbons and lace, but within 5 years offered groceries, meat, ironmongery, books, catering, and a laundry service, which reflects how shopping for the Victorians was becoming a one-stop experience. From about the 1850s onward, in major towns and cities we begin to see shops that bring together many specialized departments under one roof. These shops restructure the idea of retail: glass windows, large displays, separate departments for ladies and gentlemen, and a broad variety of goods. One article notes that by 1850, 2 of the earliest department stores, in the sense of multi-department outlets, were established, one in Newcastle and one in Manchester. By the 1870s, the concept of department stores takes off. Historical sources show that by 1876, a store featured rooms for mantles, drapery, shawls, a silk room, accessories and furnishings. And the architecture, the layout, and the window displays they used all contribute to what we recognize today as modern shopping. But why does this matter? Because it marks the birth of what historians call the consumer society. Not just production of goods, but consumption, and the experience of buying becoming part of life. Studies show that Victorian Britain moved from a market and workshop model to a retail model with display, service, and ambience. But women's shopping and women in commerce was quite different than what it is today. The department store was one of the first urban spaces where middle and upper-class women could move around semi-freely, without a male chaperone. Women in Victorian times had a male chaperone primarily to uphold their reputation and ensure they adhered to strict social etiquette, which demanded a woman's public interactions with men be supervised to prevent scandal. Over time, these large retail palaces offered women a space away from the men in their lives and changed the experience of public space. Consequently, for many women, shopping becomes not just necessity but social outing, even an assertion of independence. Yet there was a darker side for the assistants inside these shops, who were often known as genteel girls, which referred to young women who were well-bred, refined, respectable, and possessed the manners and education expected of the middle or upper classes. These young girls and women would work long hours, stand all day, and were fined for infractions, and was a form of exploitation of female labor. So shopping and fashion intersected with class, gender, labor, and consumption. And though the mid to late 19th century saw a transformative development in the creation of large department stores, we also saw the advent of cooperatives and the growth of the bazaar concept. A bazaar is a shop with many different counters inside. One premises, but many traders rent a counter each, offering a wide variety of fancy goods, toys, jewelry, brushes, baskets, fishing tackle, and so on. 1873 directory advertises a Noah's Ark fancy repository, offering everything from rocking horses to writing desks, even workboxes, games, and much more. But in many bazaars, bargaining is not allowed. Each item has a marked price, and often you will see signs that say, "Prices shall be marked, from which no abatement shall be made." So you have both novelty and fixed price retail emerging simultaneously. Another development is the cooperative store. Beginning in the north of England in the mid-1840s with the Rochdale Society of Equitable Pioneers, men and women started stores that offered share membership and quarterly dividends based on purchases people made. By the time Queen Victoria died, nearly 1/3 of all cooperative societies were paying dividends equal to the equivalent of up to 20% price reduction to loyal customers, persuading them to keep buying there. At first, these co-ops focused on groceries and provisions, later expanding into men's and women's clothing, household goods, and becoming a kind of mini department store. What these developments tell us is that shopping was being reinvented. It was moving from necessity to experience, from local to national, from individual craft to mass retail. Display and ambience mattered, and the idea of choice mattered. As competition grew in the shopping sector, so did creativity, and that's when shops started to compete to get your attention. On the streets, you might see sandwich men wearing two boards advertising shows or goods. One 1850-era journal describes these lads earning only $1 a day as they trudged the streets hours on end. That alone gives us a small, vivid image of the spectacle of advertising and how it started to enter everyday life. But more elaborate methods existed, and this was known as a gazer. A gazer is a man dressed like a dandy and fashioned up to the hilt with a gold-headed cane, an umbrella, gold watch, and an eyeglass. They would stroll outside a shop, pretend they had admiration of the window display, drop a monosyllabic "ah" or "oh" so that passers-by gather and become curious. Then the gazer enters the shop and loudly places an order. It's a kind of human billboard. The female version would stand in a doorway known as a landing net to catch hesitant customers and tempt them inside into the clutches of the skilled salesman. And inside shops, the window displays become theatrical. With glass plate windows, lights, enticing arrangement of goods, and new inventions, like the overhead cash rail, all contribute to the spectacle, and shopping begins to feel like an event and sold as an experience, all with one goal, to win your business and make a sale. Interestingly, an advice column for women shopping alone warns, "Strange shops should be entered with caution, where the shopmen are extremely urgent. Make up your mind that they are cheats." So, the drama is not only in the shop but in the caution and the social context around it. This layer of performance tells us that retail is not just about goods, but about perception, image, and even manipulation. It is marketing in its early form. But what about the assistants, apprentices, and staff? Take the case of the young and yet to be famous writer H.G. Wells, who in 1881 was apprenticed at a draper's in Southsea near Portsmouth. He recalls 13-hour days from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., cleaning windows, fetching materials, carrying display figures, cleaning up after closing, and sweeping wet sawdust. For female assistants in department stores, the hours were similarly punishing. Work would start early morning until late at night. They would stand all day and be subject to fines for breaking obscure rules. with some even living on the premises at times, all bound by strict codes of behavior. So the customer may see the glory of the shop window, but it hides the grind of labor. So if shopping in Victorian times appears glamorous on the outside, we can see that on the inside of the store there is much hard work, and often exploitative work, especially for young women seeking employment. It's part of what we might call the dark side of retail expansion. But these workers were also at the frontier of change. By being in public spaces, interacting with customers, and performing tasks, they were part of the gradual opening of women into wage work outside the home, albeit under strict supervision. Shopping in Victorian times also reflected on society socially and culturally. For example, for a middle-class household, shopping was part of the woman's job in the keeping of the home. The husband earned wages, the wife managed household expenditure, ran errands, selected goods, and maintained the home. But for working-class women, reality was different. They had a second shift after work, cleaning, cooking, and then managing the shop visits. So the act of shopping in Victorian times became entwined with gender roles. Women had their roles and men had theirs. But at the same time, department stores and new retail spaces begin to give women other experiences, such as browsing, seeing new things, and making their own choices, sometimes without a chaperone. Historians note, these stores offered women a new public space, a kind of measured freedom. That doesn't mean equality, but it does mean change. And class is everywhere in the shopping world. For instance, working-class families use markets, they haggle, and often wait to buy the reduced leftovers at the end of the day. While middle-class shoppers buy at stores with marble counters, mahogany fittings, an attentive polished service, and even home delivery. The goods themselves reflect status: exotic fruits, shellfish and game for the wealthy, bread, bacon and groceries in small quantities for the poor. There's also identity. You express who you are through what you buy and where you buy it, not dissimilar to today. If you go to a bazaar, you might buy a novelty. If you go to a cooperative, you're part of a community. If you enter a grand department store, you're performing affluence. So shopping isn't just a transaction, it's also a statement. And behind all this lies the changing nature of consumption. Goods that were once rare and expensive are becoming more accessible to Victorian society. From colourful fabrics to mass-produced accessories, even imported fruits, all start to become accessible for many people. And as the textile and industrial revolutions roll onward, so does variety and availability. Fashion becomes differentiated by gender and class, and the notion of novelty becomes powerful. These moments show the strangeness of the era, the mix of novelty and tradition, the glimmer of modernity, and the tug between the old and the new. But why did shopping change during the Victorian era, and how did those changes ripple outward? There are several factors here. First, there was industrialization, where the mass production of fabrics, goods, and cheaper imports meant more variety, lower costs, and more goods in the shops. For example, Victorian fashion only incorporated bright aniline dyes when it was first invented in 1859. This had an impact on the global spread of new materials and chemistry. And urbanization was also a factor. Towns and cities grew. More people living in concentrated areas meant more shops, more demand and diversity of retail. So, shops in large cities could support specialist retailers and department stores. And let's not forget transport. Where the railways travel further, goods could arrive fresher and be distributed to towns, and home delivery becomes feasible for the middle classes. As for technology and business innovation, this can be seen by the displaying of goods, fixed price retail rather than haggling, fixed accounts for customers, overhead cash rails, window display architecture, and the rise and diversity of advertising methods. These factors changed consumer culture. Shopping becomes less about necessity and more about choice, novelty, status, and identity. And with the emergence of the department store, we see the consumer change from someone who shops rather than just buys. As a result, by the end of the Victorian era, you are looking at something that resembles our modern shopping world. Fixed prices, display windows, multiple departments, home delivery, and credit accounts for the middle classes. Yet at the same time, many things haven't changed. Working hours remain long, conditions tough, the poorest still struggle to buy basics, and shops still reflect deep social divides. The act of shopping in Victorian times is a lens. Through it we see class difference, gender roles, work and recreation, technology, modernity creeping in, and tradition clinging on. We also see choice expand, and the idea that you might choose between many goods, many shops, and many price points. And the physical form of the shop changes too, bigger, brighter, and more lavish. And rather than being functional, shopping becomes social, performative, and status-driven. And the one thing that stays the same, whether Victorian or in today's modern world, is the human impulse to desire and acquire. In today's world, we might take for granted fixed prices, home delivery, endless choice, and the department or the online store. But many of those things began in the Victorian era. We owe much of our modern shopping world to those cracked gas lamps, shop assistants sweeping sawdust from the floor, and the booming cities where new shops opened in the mid-1800s. So next time you stroll through a shopping centre, click through an online store, or browse a display window, pause for a moment and remember the pioneers such as the grocer tallying your weekly debt in a trust book, the women loading up shopping baskets at the co-op, or the dandy gazer lingering outside a shop to entice you in, because each of these threads run deep in modern-day shopping culture. In those shops lies a story of people, families, work and change, and continues today for all of us. If you've enjoyed this journey into Victorian shopping and love stories of the past, enjoy relevant visuals, and appreciate history documentaries, don't forget to like and subscribe to Obscura Historia today.